Hello, good evening, everyone. It's Alan here with our weekly Discovering Buddhism session. Hopefully, we'll have more luck tonight than last week when we lost our connection halfway through. Anyway, I hope you're well, and we'll do our best. We're at the mercy of the NBM. Hi, Julia. Good to see you there. If we drop out, as usual, we've nothing we can do. You've got very good transcript there of the whole module, Venerable Connie Miller's transcript, which if you do it by correspondence at home, that's actually all you have, really. Although I think you can ask some questions. So I guess we should be grateful for whatever time we can get this very troubled time, to be able to sit together and do some practice, do some study is fantastic, really. One student has suggested a retreat day, if it's possible. We haven't scheduled it. I'll give it some thought and talk to Rain. And the trouble, we need to have it, I think for a retreat day, it needs to be interactive. So we probably have to use Zoom and also find the slot, the time that we can actually do it. So I'll think about it between now and next week and let you know whether we can fit in a retreat day. So in the meantime, I've sent you some material. Apart from the notes tonight, I've sent you the newspaper article about Sogyal Rinpoche, the allegations, and that was a couple of years ago. So we'll look at that, problems with the guru and spiritual teacher, next week. Also sent you the questions for the module, so you can have a look at those, and I'll give you the answers next week, the Discovering Buddhist handouts. If you'd like to write any answers, of course, just email me. You're more than welcome. Send me any answers to some or all, or any comments on general. Always welcome, always. Okay, so we'll just, let's do our normal 5 minutes calm abiding mindfulness practice to settle the mind, make us receptive. So get comfortable, the chair, the cushion, the floor, whatever's easy, and we'll settle ourselves. Okay, just coming into the mind, our internal world, the mind and the body, what's happening inside. Just setting our motivation for the session. Moment to reflect on the great opportunity and good fortune we have to sit, do some practice together, study the Dharma. Study the amazing teachings of the Buddha. Take care of our minds. Make progress on the path to full enlightenment. We're doing our practice not just for our own interest and benefit, but for benefit of others. Ultimately to be of maximum use to all others by becoming a Buddha, becoming Buddha mind ourselves. Now coming into the body, adjusting our position to be evenly balanced. Just checking for any muscle tension, the shoulders, the neck. feeling the weight of the body on the floor of the chair. Breathing out any tension in the body. Breathing out the day's busyness, the day's distractions. And then focusing more on the breath. Just letting ourselves watch the breath and the movement of the body with the breath. The breath is very reliable, very physical, non-conceptual. Bringing our mind into the body, down to earth. Watching the thoughts, letting them go as easily as they enter the mind. We let them go and stay with the breath. Resting our focus on the breath, also watching introspection, monitoring, checking, are we on the breath? Have we just been distracted? Adjusting, letting go of the distraction, coming back to the breath. Okay, so just spend a little bit of time on covering the stuff that we didn't cover last week, and just looking back last week, we did get to just look at those different levels of teachers, the different levels from the point of view of the student, and perhaps from the point of view of the teacher, what the teacher is intending to do. So the Dharma professor, the expert on Buddhism, or the academic, could be an academic, could be a university situation. And His Holiness suggests that for the first contact with the teacher, when we don't know anything about them, it might be a good idea to just look at them as a learned professor before we go any deeper, and just checking out whether he's well qualified or he or she's well qualified, and just watching as if that person is an expert on the subject. And then if we connect, we could go perhaps a bit deeper and see him as a Dharma instructor, the second level, where the Dharma instructor is giving information, but also giving some context to some practice, perhaps meditation. So that could be a lay teacher or a ordained Sangha at centres. The meditation leader, which is very similar, it's just mainly looking more at practice and rituals. And the fourth one is the spiritual teacher. So that's the transition from to the spiritual teacher is where we have to be careful to check very carefully, because the spiritual teacher is the person who we entrust to give us the teachings, and we entrust them to as we would. There's a lot of there's a commitment. There's some sort of commitment involved on the student side. We need to go slowly at that stage. And comparing the spiritual teacher to the therapist, quite useful analysis, particularly by Alexander Berzin. We don't need to go on that, it's fairly straightforward. The therapist really is not providing an ultimate solution or way to answer the life's big questions, basically dealing with a particular problem with the patient or the client. So let's just have a look at the things we didn't cover, particularly the becoming a qualified disciple, just briefly. So again, His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teaching on this is very good in the book Foundation of Buddhist Practice, and also Alex Berzin's very good on this too. So basically three things. Everyone seems to agree on this, that there needs to be, the student needs to have an open mind. Open mind is really important. It's prepared to see both sides of an argument. And of course, this is important for really approaching any subject, really, that we're not familiar with. But it's particularly important when we're looking at something as deep as the Dharma, or a spiritual path, when looking for a spiritual path. And also, if you think about how extraordinary some of the teachings are, how they do challenge our beliefs, often said to be very revolutionary and completely subversive. Things like nothing exists as it appears. There's teachings on wisdom, being told that everything that we regard as pleasure is actually suffering. These are quite shocking things, And so this is why the importance of having an open mind, being willing to be challenged, and having impartial. So if we have an impartial approach, we're going to actually be much our conviction will be much stronger, much harder to be shaken if we've approached things even-handedly, approach the ideas, check them out. Of course, all the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha himself saying, check things out. Don't just accept anything because I've said it, or anything because there's some sort of scriptural authority. Check up, as Lama Yeshe always used to say, check up, check up, check up. Trust your own wisdom when you're at this stage. So impartial mind, intelligence, which probably better described as discernment. So being able to see what's true and what's not, where the idea of seeing what a good, how something is well argued, how something stacks up. Discern what is correct and what isn't. So this can involve looking at the authority of the teacher, particularly lineage. Are they qualified? Is the teacher? Can his practice be traced back to an unbroken lineage, to the Buddha himself, which most of our teachers in His Holiness the Dalai Lama is always, before he starts teaching, gives some background as to where the lineage comes from, the teaching that he's about to give. And so all the high teachers do that, show that they're not just making it up. It goes back 2,000 years at least, or more, 2,500. So be able to discriminate, number two, and then the last one is have some sort of enthusiasm for the teachings, interest and diligence, so that we're able to sort of continue. We see something there of value, and we've got the enthusiasm to follow it up, and we don't mind getting up early in the morning. We can bear hardships, and it goes to some inconvenience to study the Dharma. When you think of some of the stories about what this disciples had to do thousands of years ago, when they had to travel from Tibet to India to get teaching from the Nalanda masters, risking their lives, traveling for months. It's actually quite easy for us to get teachings. We can just go online and we can sit and watch His Holiness the Dalai Lama teaching in our lounge rooms, which is pretty incredible at the moment. What luxury, really. So, but to actually maintain that interest and enthusiasm, to see this is definitely something worth pursuing, something that's going to benefit us and other beings. So those three things: open mind, intelligence, discernment, and enthusiasm. Okay. So just briefly, quickly on the other benefits of relying on a spiritual teacher. They're there from last week. I won't go through them all. So one thing that Lama Zopa always says is, if you don't have a teacher and you don't see the need for a teacher, the Dharma can be very dry. He says the mind can become like a desert. I remember him saying that once, very barren. So it's just facts. But the idea of the teacher gives richness and interest to our practice, study and practice. So this is because the teacher is such a powerful object. We generate much more merit than a normal person, because first the teacher is powerful object. And so anything we do that benefits the teacher or conforms with the teacher's advice, it's going to really give us a massive amount of merit. It's a bit like teaching say that our parents are very powerful objects. So if anything we do positive or negative towards that parent, it's going to have a much more stronger karmic imprint on our minds than to a person who's not in that situation, not a parent. So the parents are powerful, but the guru or the spiritual teacher is even more powerful, much more powerful, the most powerful object of our practice. So the other good thing is once we have this connection with a teacher or teachers, it's much more likely that in future lives we'll meet teachers. We've already put the imprints down in our subtle mind, and so the karmic disposition is there to meet teachings and teachers in the future. And things seem to go well. The last point, we effortlessly achieve all our short and long-term aims. Having a teacher in our hearts and it tends to make obstacles disappear or lessen the force of obstacles. So second point is the cultivating trust by seeing their qualities and kindness. So how do we know if we understand the benefits, then how to, of this teacher, how to get there. So the more we practice, the closer we come to their minds and the Buddha's mind. So if the teacher is a qualified teacher, that person's mind is incredibly refined and powerful. So our minds come closer to the teacher's mind. Becoming close to the teacher's mind, we come closer to the Buddha's mind. And His Holiness points out that this is not blind faith, because if we use our reasoning, our rational faculties to accept the person as the teacher and investigate their teachings, their qualifications, their practice, and so on, then we have confidence based on strong reasons, good reasons, a strong foundation for our faith based on good reasons. And a lot of it is to do with seeing, just to quote there what His Holiness says, the benefits or loss that accrues to us in our relationship with the teacher depends on which qualities or faults we choose to focus on. So if we make the mistake of focusing on the faults, because the guru will, the teacher will, as a human being, exhibit faults, then we'll suffer. Our progress won't. We won't make progress. We'll suffer a loss. If we focus on the teacher's positive quality, then we get profit, as Lama Zopa calls it. If we want profit, look at the good qualities of the teacher. Don't focus or dwell on the negative qualities. So if we see them as ordinary, then we'll we won't take the teachings seriously, and we'll miss the opportunity to make profit. There's a good example later in tonight's class, this wonderful story of a woman who had great faith in the Buddha during the time of the Buddha, and she asked his son, who was going on a trip to where the Buddha was giving teachings, to bring back a relic. And so actually it might have been after the Buddha had passed away, so she wanted some relic of the Buddha. And the son did the trip and came back and realized he'd forgotten to bring the relic. So he got a dog's tooth and wrapped it up very ornately and pretended that was a relic of the Buddha and gave it to the mother. and the mother was ecstatic, and she prayed every day to the dog's tooth, and the force of her prayers was so powerful that the dog's tooth turned into a relic and actually manifested these what relics do if sometimes they manifest little flowers, and they grow. So the dog's tooth actually became a relic by the force of her faith. So power of the mind, how we view the object, the person. So that's just sort of skimming over some of the things we missed out on last week. But this week, who knows how long we've got, so probably a good idea to start. So we're going to look at the importance of seeing the kindness of the teacher, the importance of seeing them as Buddhas at a certain level, what that means. Not that we should jump in and do that straight away, but that concept of seeing the spiritual teachers as Buddha, the role of devotion, and relying on spiritual teachers in our actions and behaviour. And then if we've got time, we'll do the meditation I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks, which is the one on why we need a spiritual guide, which is the very first meditation in Connie Miller's transcript. Hopefully we'll get time for that. So this, so just this way we can develop respect to a person who seems to be eligible for a spiritual teacher, and focusing on the kindness. And it's said that the Buddhas, this is very interesting, quite a stunning statement, that the Buddha, the guru or the spiritual teacher is kinder than all the Buddhas in general, and more kind than Guru Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha in particular. This is something that Lama Zopa stresses very much in his book, The Heart of the Path. So the reasoning here is that Connie Miller's transcript's very good on this. So she points out that the Buddhas, as enlightened beings, if the Buddha was actually manifesting as they call it Dharmakaya, the enlightened mind, we wouldn't see them, and we wouldn't see them if they were in the very refined form of Sambhogakaya, which is the like a spiritual form. Only bodhisattvas and very highly realized beings can actually see Buddhas in those forms. So the only way we can see a person who is enlightened, and we may not even notice, is if they're in human being form, because we can only see human beings. So the gurus have to appear as ordinary human beings in order to be able to communicate with us. That's called the Nirmanakaya aspect. And so the historical Buddha has come and gone, and we didn't get to become enlightened. We may not have, whatever we were doing at that time, we didn't have the opportunity or the karma to hear his teachings, and all the great beings who've become enlightened since, we haven't made a connection with. So if we have a connection and do manage to make a connection with a spiritual teacher, then that person has actual contact. We have actual contact with that person, whereas we didn't have contact with the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, or Buddhas in general, previous Buddhas in general. So the fact that we've made contact, if we have a spiritual guide, means that person is more kind, because that person is actually being able to lead us on the path to enlightenment. And I remember in Lama Yeshe's biography, Big Love, I'm still reading it. Lama Yeshe, Lama Yeshe was Lama Zopa's guru, one of his guru, and Lama Yeshe manifested as a very easygoing, easy to communicate, down to earth, good humoured person, whereas Lama Zopa seems more reserved. And there's a few times in the book where Lama Yeshe says that it's so difficult for Lama Zopa because he's such a highly realised being, for him to come down to our level, to come down to the level of the students. And so that's why it's very difficult for him sometimes to appear like one of us. So Lama Yeshe said that. Of course, Lama Yeshe, of course, was also coming down to our level as well. I've just got a little sign coming up. My connection is unstable. I just hope that doesn't come again. Everything seems to be normal. Good heavens. So pray to Buddha that we will continue to be connected. So the other aspect of the kindness of the guru or the spiritual teacher is this idea of blessings on the mind stream. So this idea of blessings, it actually, in the beginning, when I first met Buddhism, I didn't understand how things could be blessed, or how certain objects could be regarded as sacred because they'd been blessed. Quite a esoteric, how certain objects could be regarded as sacred because they'd been blessed. Quite a esoteric idea. So His Holiness discussed this very well. He says that if a person has high realizations, his mind is very realized, very refined, has these what he calls marvelous qualities, then they will be able to influence ordinary beings in a positive way. Just their existence and being in their presence can help the minds of ordinary beings. And he gives the example of the power some people have to hypnotize others. We've obviously see this in shows and so on. And he says that power of mind is due to some karmic imprint that they developed in previous lives. Another good example would be some people have clairvoyance, and they can actually predict what will happen in some situations. But they're not necessarily high beings, those who can hypnotize and so on, but they have some sort of mind, quality of mind. So he gives that, he says, if there are people like this, they're ordinary people. Surely those with great realizations, great compassion, great wisdom, must be able to do even more with their minds. And their activities, if they're actually Buddha minds, are going to spontaneously be able to help beings, those who are in their presence, or even not in their presence, those who have made a connection with them. This is the idea that the spiritual guide, spiritual friend can help us, even if they're on the other side of the world. So this is another thing that comes out in Lama, so to speak. We don't have to walk around with the guru or the spiritual friend physically. The contact might be quite brief, quite fleeting, but the connection, if the spiritual guide has this power of mind, then they can help those who have made a connection, those who have an open mind to that person, who have allowed that person's power to come into their mind, their hearts, then they're going to be able to help from afar. So these idea of making requests, requesting is regarded as very important in establishing a contact with the teacher, requesting blessings, requesting help, petitioning, and making visualizing the blessings in the form of light, etc. So the conviction is important, and so this is really the basis of our idea of refuge. We are convinced that the Buddha himself was an enlightened being, the feasibility of enlightenment, that we too can become enlightened. The Dharma is there as the medicine, the way to becoming enlightened, and the Sangha are the agents, the teachers, the ordained people there as examples or agents of the teachings. Different. His Holiness compares it to the idea of praying to God, which an external creator, he says. So it's different to that, the idea of requesting blessings and receiving blessings from the teacher. It involves more activity. It's not passive. We're not just praying to God and saying, please do the work of helping us and sitting back. Though we still need to practice. We see that there is a path, Fourth Noble Truth. So we pray that we have blessings or help to make progress along the path. It still requires effort compared to the idea of praying to an external creator. So he makes that point. We're still connected, I think. So this idea of seeing seeing spiritual teachers as Buddhas. So this basically is, if you've read Connie Miller on this as well, she points out that really it's the tantric teachings where this is important. We can, at the level of Theravada teachings, where we see the teacher as the agent of the Buddha, like the Buddha, and also at the Mahayana stage, the person is exhibiting qualities of the Buddha, but we don't go as far as saying the person, we regard the teacher as the Buddha. So this is something that happens in Tantra, and so His Holiness says really it shouldn't be taught to people who haven't got some knowledge of the teachings, the basic teaching, because they can get the wrong ideas. So basically said if the person's giving, at the tantric level, there's this, the guru or the teacher will be giving a tantric initiation, empowerment. And so His Holiness says if the teacher can do this, then he has incredible realizations. And even if that person who may not have all the realizations of the Buddha, if we see them as Buddhas, it increases our concentration, enhances our meditative experience. So again, the example of the mother who prayed to what was not a holy relic, but she made it a holy relic by her power of mind. So if the person, again, if the person can give, the teacher can give all the four empowerments which are given at a tantric teaching, then he's definitely a Buddha, says His Holiness, and seeing him is reasonable. He says even if we're practicing at a lower level, like liberation, the Theravadan level, and also the perfection level, the Mahayana level, we can still regard the person as a teacher, as a Buddha, but we don't have to. It's not part of the requirements, but in Tantra it is part of the requirements. And he quotes Lama Tsongkhapa saying, if we see the Guru's qualities, we'll benefit from the teachings and guidance. So if we see that there are good qualities there, we will benefit. But this doesn't mean that we suspend all rational thought. And he gives an example that if the person's a Buddha, I don't need to. He will never get sick. So if he does manifest sickness, then we don't need to call the doctor. So he says, this is what he calls a fanciful idea. So there will be times where the teacher needs help, and giving help will be incredibly beneficial to ourselves, because we're offering service to the teacher, the spiritual teacher, which is very powerful. So it's proper reliance, to quote word for word His Holiness, proper reliance on the teacher is wholeheartedly appreciating their good qualities and not focusing on their weaknesses. We're not enlightened beings, so we'll see weaknesses. Even if they're not there, we'll see weaknesses. And so appreciating their good qualities, focusing on them is proper reliance. And he gives the example of, in some of our Lam-Rim practices, we visualize a situation for the benefit of our practice. And one of them is, although I haven't done this practice, visualizing all the earth covered with skeletons. So that all the sentient beings being just skeletons. I'm not sure whether that means they're walking, living skeletons, or they're actually deceased skeleton. But by that visualization can be very powerfully, says, to appreciate impermanence, because that's exactly where our body will end up eventually. The other practice we visualize to help deal with attachment, we visualize a person who we might find very, very attractive as components of flesh, blood, excrement, mucus, all the the unattractive parts that are actually there that we don't see. We're just looking at the skin. So we visualize a certain aspect to help counteract the attraction, the attachment that is mistakenly putting too much icing on the cake. Okay? We're trying to visualize more of the whole picture. So same skeletons, there are skeletons all over the earth now, but we don't see them. So this will have a positive effect on our mind. So he gives us an example of where visualization and imagining something different to what we see it is very, very powerful and useful. And similarly, if we do see flaws, say if we see what the teacher, what we might think is a rude or inappropriate behaviour, it could be that he says we can actually transform this into this is a manifesto of how I appear when I'm rude. I'm looking at a mirror of myself. So we'll come back to this more next week when we look at when teachers appear to act inappropriately, abusively, and so there's plenty of good advice from His Holiness and others on how to deal with this. It can be a difficult situation. So, so finally, he says that if we can't give our teachers the space to have faults, it will be very difficult to develop tolerance and forgiveness to sentient beings who do have faults. This ability to allow our teachers the space to have faults as human beings, manifesting a human body with which ages, which gets sick, then if we give them space to have faults, then we'll be more forgiving and able to develop loving kindness to ordinary beings, sentient beings. So then the other phrase that pops up a lot is that the spiritual teacher being the root of the path. Spiritual teacher is the root of the path. So it's true. The spiritual teacher is the root of the path. Very. It's called the heart of the path in Lama Zopa's book, Heart of the Path, Guru Devotion. But as His Holiness points out, we also need other conditions to grow in the Dharma, to grow our practice, to make progress. So we also need to have develop merit. Merit is like compost on the mind, making offerings, prostrating, rejoicing. The 7 limb prayer is a good example of this way of softening and preparing the mind for teachings or practice. So we need a lot of merit, and we also need purification, practice purification, attending teaching, study, cultivating renunciation, the 3 principles of the path: renunciation, compassion, and wisdom, right view. So these are basically, we need to practice the Lama Rim, is what he's saying. The teacher is the root of the path. A teacher will help, having a spiritual teacher will help speed up the process and make our practice successful. But it still needs effort. We still need to make effort. So he says often there are a few cases. We probably, if we've done some reading, some incredible stories of great masters, particularly the Indian Nalanda masters, who, due to their devotion and karmic imprints, have become liberated very quickly when they meet their teacher. The classic story is the one of Naropa and Tilopa. Tilopa was this old man who appeared to be a kind of a homeless person hanging around the wharves eating fish that were thrown away by the fishermen, cooking them and eating them. And Naropa was told to go and find Tilopa and make him his guru. So there are these wonderful stories, miraculous stories, where Naropa finds Tilopa, and Tilopa actually appears to be treating Naropa really badly. And he tells Naropa to do extraordinary things like jump off buildings, interrupt marriage ceremonies, do incredibly difficult things, appear to be extremely harmful to other beings and also to Tilopa. But of course, this is an enlightened being. And then finally, there's this scene where Tilopa, Naropa says, "Please give me teachings. I want you to make you my guru." And so he said, "Well, offer me a mandala." This is in the middle of the desert, so he has nothing to make a mandala. So he urinates in the desert to make this sort of pattern of a mandala and offers that. And Tilopa picks it up and throws it, hits it on the head with it, and Naropa becomes enlightened. All his obscurations have disappeared. So these miraculous stories, wonderful to listen to. As His Holiness says, these people, these unusual beings, have incredibly strong karmic, positive karmic inspiration, disposition, so that the point of becoming enlightened, all they need is some sort of connection with the teacher, such as being hit on the head by a shoe or a mandala, and they can become all these enlightened beings. So this is actually, this can happen. It's very rare, but one of my very close friends who's since passed away, a very old lady who I met around Sydney, she used to come to the centres in the early days in Sydney. Her name was Wynne. She was a very spiritual person. She grew up during the Depression in a very poor family. She never ate meat, even though the family ate meat. But she was just found it very difficult to live in Sydney during the Depression, and couldn't accept Christianity, and was just crying out for some sort of alternative. And she was walking past a shop in Pt3 where they were advertising a Theosophical Society, and she went in there, and she was immediately connected with their teachings, because they actually had some Buddhist teaching. So then this is probably in the 50s, she heard that His Holiness had just left Tibet, and just as soon as she heard that, she booked a ticket and went to India, and actually lined up. I think she probably was the first Australian ever to meet His Holiness. When he was giving blessings, not many people around in those days in India, and as soon as His Holiness touched her head, she told me that she had this unbelievable, she called it an experience. So she said for days and days later, she was in bliss. So I've just told me this very confidentially, of course. So this is, when I read about these miraculous, when people meet the teacher, they have these experiences. They can, if they're very highly realized being, teaching can just trigger something to release them and give them incredible realizations. So, of course, it's rare, but they're very inspiring to hear these stories. We need to develop that sort of karmic imprint in our own minds. So the topic of relying on the spirit, that's relying on the spirit teacher by our minds, by our attitudes, devotion. How do we rely on spirit teacher? By action, physical action. So there are three main practices: making offerings. So material offerings, they can be imaginary. So this is what we do when we offer a mandala in our practice. We might have some modest offerings on the altar. So we imagine that we're offering the entire universe, all the things that are to us very beautiful and special, beautiful sceneries, beautiful food, beautiful music, great blissful experiences if we've had them, and we can put all this in the mandala and magnify it multiple times, infinite number of times, and offer it. So this could be imaginary, or we can actually make offerings in terms of monetary offering, objects, and so on. So as His Holiness points out, and all the teachings point out, the gurus or the great beings that we're offering them to don't need these offerings. Okay? We're not actually enriching their lives because their mind, there's no external objects necessary for them to be completely satisfied. So it's about us creating the merit towards these powerful objects of merit. So we have the opportunity, we can make offerings. Sometimes the offerings might be given back. There's sometimes the teachers might think that if we're giving, say, incense, I've heard of a story where a student gave incense to High Lama in Nepal, Tibet, India, and he handed the incense back and said, use it on your altar. So sometimes, depending on the minds of the student or the disciple might, the guru might accept the offering, might actually give it back with kind motivation, of course. The second one is offering our service and energy. So this is, running centres, volunteering at centres, probably the most widespread way if we can offer service. We can help in whatever way is needed at centres. Remember Lami, or might have been Lama Zopa, said even attending to the pets or the dogs of the guru or the spiritual teacher will create incredible merit, because they're called paws of the guru. Any sort of person or sentient being associated with the teacher is a very powerful object. If we make offerings to the close disciples of our teacher, then that's a very powerful way of getting merit and to serving the guru. So attending to their needs. So the guru is not. We can actually. You see, when went to France last year for teachings on Vajrayogini Centre, it's amazing to see all these volunteers, over 100, 200 I think it was, all devoted to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all helping us do our retreat. 200 French country people there, cleaning toilets, making food, making it easy for us to do our retreats. It's incredible, unbelievable example of service. Last one, offering practice. So this is said to be the best way to offer service to the guru, is our practice. Because what we're doing is enacting the teachings that the teacher is giving us, the spiritual teachers, putting the instructions into practice. So anything that will develop our minds in accordance with those teachings is an incredible offering. If we can, doing study, doing retreats and so on, it's all incredible service. So how are we going? 7 o'clock? Okay. So so another good point, behaviour towards the teacher. So His Holiness points out that sometimes in general teachings, and this is probably, we can see this in practice sometimes. So the teacher is giving some teachings to a group, maybe some advice, and then we might get some advice from the teacher ourselves, one-to-one, that might be different. Or we might hear that a fellow student has been given special teachings or some advice from a teacher that's different to the group. So this is, I think I mentioned this last week, the Lama Yeshe's biography, Big Love, has got full of examples of different advice Lama Yeshe gives to his different students according to their mental dispositions. Some of them he gave them the job of setting up businesses, becoming business people. Some of them he told them to do retreats, long, difficult retreats, and others to do something more administrative. So there are all these different students of Lama Yeshe doing all different things, and what they were doing was for the benefit of their minds. He could perceive which was the most useful practice, whether to work in the world or to do retreats, or some of them he would tell them to go and look after your family. Okay, your family is more important. Looking after your family is your teacher, is your service. That's your practice, the Buddhist practice. So we all have different different ways according to our mental disposition. So respecting our guru does not mean that we have to agree on every issue. So again, His Holiness always sort of surprised me. He says sometimes we might see that particularly Tibetan teachers may not be vegetarian, whereas students might take that very seriously. In which case we can follow our own, what we feel is correct, and stay vegetarian. We don't have to. In that case, we can disagree on some issues. And he gives the example of Atisha, the great master from India, who went to Indonesia, where to get teachings from Selingpa. This is when we were in the places in Java where, like holy places, where Atisha was receiving teachings from Selingpa. And Selingpa had a view of emptiness that Atisha didn't agree with. So Atisha's view of emptiness was the highest Prasangika Madhyamika school, and Selingpa's was not quite there. It was an inferior school. So Atisha, even though he totally devoted to Selingpa, he actually differed and adopted a higher view. So these things can happen. We don't need to. We can sometimes disagree, and sometimes the Guru will allow us to practice slightly differently. His Holiness gives a good example, actually, in his book. He says that there's this his junior tutor, Trijang Rinpoche, practiced Shugden, which is a protector practice, which His Holiness decided was a harmful practice. So he points out in his book that he still greatly respected his guru, Trijang Rinpoche, his junior tutor, but differed on that particular aspect of practicing this particular protector practice. So that really made, I think, is pretty, His Holiness having a slight disagreement with some aspect of practice, one of his tutors. So just we'll do the all things going quite well so far. So we'll have time to do, hopefully, the meditation on the importance of having a teacher. So just some interesting quotes there that Choki had collected in her notes, which I put in. Then there's these liberation means Pabonka's book, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. This is on the last page of the notes. So I think I've quoted that one. If you want profit, regard your guru as a Buddha, whether he is or not, you'll effortlessly achieve all your wishes in this and future lives. A great profit indeed. And then the example of that woman worshipping the tooth, the dog's tooth. So the other excellent image, or we need a lens if we actually want to ignite fire. So we need to sort of focus the power of the sun's ray on some fuel to start a fire. So this is sometimes used as an example of the Guru focusing the power of the teachings and the blessings of all the Buddhas. So it's like a magnifying glass. The Guru can focus all the Buddhas. So it's like a magnifying glass. The Guru can focus the blessings of the Guru, all the past and present Buddhas, in the powers of those minds into the student mind, because of the connection between the spiritual teacher and the student, that open channel of communication. another good example of how we see things, how our mind will determine how we actually see the external world. And the example is often given of different beings in samsara: a god, which is from the upper realms, a human, and a hungry ghost. They all see the bowl of water in a different way. So it's said in the teachings that the god will see that bowl of water as nectar, the human will see it as water, and the hungry ghost will see it as molten, or as pus and blood, something that's completely revolting. So this is due to the karmic lens of the mind, those different beings, the different states of mind. The other example there of practicing for years in the cave, requesting the Buddha to appear, rejecting Maitreya to appear and give blessings, and years and years and years nothing happened. And then he finally left the cave and went down to the village. He saw this dog lying on the road dying from maggots, being this infestation of maggots, and was feeling such incredible compassion that he wanted to kill the maggots, and he wanted to help the dog. So he took the maggots from the dog with his tongue, and as soon as he bent down to do that, the dog turned into a Maitreya Buddha. So he managed to see Maitreya. So he said, why didn't you appear before? And he said, I was actually there in the cave. I was always there with you, but your mind couldn't see me until you had this experience of compassion, and then your obstacles cleared, and you saw what was already there. That is the Buddha in front of you. So all these are wonderful, powerful stories that help our development of devotion, or the seeing the importance of the spiritual teacher. So we can do the practice. I can't believe we're still on the air. It's fantastic. So we shouldn't speak too soon. We'll do the very first practice that I've been trying to do for the last 2 weeks. It's within Connie Miller's notes, why we need a spiritual guide. So, so with this practice, if you're still looking for you haven't sort of got a guru. So the visualizations can be of the Buddha himself, or you could perhaps use someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who you might have had teachings with, have some faith towards. So if you can visualize, so what we do, I'll just outline the actual steps. So step one is to just think of the importance of teachers in our lives. So it's mundane teachers. This is so starting with the parents. We had to learn how to walk, to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, how to behave in the world, how to speak, learning the alphabet. So we move into our school teachers, our secular education. Then we can think of perhaps special teachers who we made a connection with, special teachers at school, or maybe it might be family members who've encouraged us and we felt have had some belief in us, and so have inspired us. So that experience of having someone who we look up to, who has faith in us and helps us to have faith in them. So then the next step is to think of their kindness and develop a sense of appreciation. So we think of what they've done, and then next step is to feel something back towards the appreciation and gratitude that we've actually had some benefits from them. But we're still at the secular level. The third step is where we actually think about how spiritual teachers, how powerful and important they must be if we even at the secular level, mundane level, we need teaching. So if we're looking for someone to help us improve our mind, and to actually offer us a way of complete release from suffering and a way out of our situation, then how important it must be to have someone who can rely on to do that. So think of the magnifying glass example, the idea of a guide to work our way through a place we haven't been before. We're dealing with our minds, and so we obviously need someone who's got experience of the mind and who's actually travelled the path before. We need a guide, someone who knows more than we do, someone who's been has some realizations. So then the last step is contemplate what sort of spiritual teacher we desire to find. So think specifically about the qualities. Those in our very first class, we looked at qualities of a spiritual teacher: someone who puts others before self, is free of worldly concerns, has compassion for their students, more knowledge than we do. And again, if we can think of some teachers, again, this is a fantastic example, some living examples.